Okay, good morning, everyone. We are learning chapter 42 of the book of Tanya. We are on page 525. Just a quick review. We're learning about Kabbalat Ol, Yirat Shamayim, accepting God's authority. And what we're learning, let me just spotlight this. Everyone can see me a little bit here. Perfect. What we're learning is based on an incredible Talmud that explains a verse of the Torah, where the verse is Moshe speaking to the Jewish people, saying, "What is God asking from you already? All He's asking is to fear God. Kiyim liyirat Hashem." So the question the Talmud asks is that such a small accomplishment, such a small task? That's a tall order. To fear God is big stuff. So the Talmud answers, well, for Moshe, it wasn't that big of a deal. For Moshe, Atu Yira Milsa Zutrasahi, and the Talmud answers in like I mean Moshe, in regards to Moshe, it is something small. So the Tanya asks, but wait a minute, the Torah is not speaking to Moshe. The Torah is Moshe speaking to the Jew. So then, in regards to the Jew, it is a tall order. So why is it making it to sound like it's an insignificant, small matter? So what we're learning now in chapter 42 is each and every one of us have a quality of Moshe inside of us. And when we tap into this quality of Moshe, then we're able to also tap into our power of Yira, to fear God, that's inside of us. Why do we have this quality of Moshe? So we started explaining that there's 7 shepherds in Jewish history. It's 7 leaders. Out of these seven shepherds, the Moshe is shepherding the power of Das inside of us. And Das means to focus. Das means to recognize and to personalize an idea. And when we utilize the Das that we have by tapping into the Moshe inside of us, we have Das. When we do that, we're able to tap into our Yirat Shamayim. So that will take us to 525. We'll start again from the top of the page, and I'll be pulling it up on the Kindle in just a moment. Okay. Centered. Let's go back one page. Okay, so we'll start from the middle of the Kindle page toward the top of 525. But why then do we only need a spark of Moshe's soul in order to worship God properly? Wouldn't we need a spark from all 7 shepherds? What's unique based on the Zohar of Moshe's soul that we need to have over all the other 6 shepherds that also should be something that we tap into? So the Tanya explains a foundational idea, and that is as follows. And while each of the shepherds can nourish a particular attribute in our souls, Moshe, our teacher of blessed memory, combines them all, nourishing all the attributes, including reverence of God, Yira. And that is why throughout the Zohar, Moshe, he is the one that is called there you go. Whoops, I'm sorry, there was 2 people waiting in the room. Moshe is the one who's called the faithful shepherd, being the archetypal shepherd who fulfills the function of them all. And I apologize, Mrs. Berger and Lynn, if you guys were waiting in the waiting room for a while. I did not see you guys. Okay, so why is Moshe able to nourish our souls with all the emotional attributes in contrast to the other shepherds? What's unique about Moshe? That he's able to combine all the shepherds' powers and nourish our souls on a more significant level than the other, while the other shepherds are only able to nourish a specific particular attribute. So the Tanya explains what's unique about Moshe, and it's like this. And that's because Moshe causes Das to flow to all the souls of Israel. As we have learned on page 62 in chapter 3, the transition from thinking to feeling takes place via the agency of Das, which is recognition, a process through which ideas become personally relevant. By nourishing our Das, Moshe's soul influences the entire range of our emotions, enabling us to worship God. And this enables each individual to have Das of God. So just to summarize, again, the idea that Moshe is a shepherd, one of the 7 shepherds, but it's specifically Moshe that shepherds and nourishes in us all the attributes that all the other shepherds are nourishing in us as well. So each shepherd is nurturing and nourishing us with one specific attribute. Moshe is able to do all of them. What is unique about Moshe? Because Moshe is the one that's shepherding Das. Das is the transition between what's in our mind to the feeling in our heart. So when we tap into the Das inside of us, when we have the nurturing of Moshe inside of us, and having this Das, which is to recognize, to personally resonate with an idea, making it relevant, that allows us to have Das of God, and that allows us to develop our emotions and our attributes. But whereas for those that join now, we're on 3 paragraphs from the bottom of 525. And I think I should look in the Kindle so I could follow along and turn the page. Okay. But the extent to which you succeed in acquiring Das depends on 3 factors. Number 1, or A, it will be according to your soul's own cognitive abilities. And B, it depends on your soul's root above. And C, it also depends on the level from which your soul can draw energy from the root of Moshe's soul. Obviously, the Das of Moshe's soul doesn't replace the Das in your soul. It merely enhances whatever is there already. So even with this assistance, you're still limited by your soul's powers, both in terms of nurture, how well your soul has matured intellectually, and nature, your soul's spiritual root, and its level of access to Moshe's soul. But what gives Moshe's soul the ability to nourish your Das? What is his special power? Moshe's soul being rooted in supernal Das, or in Hebrew it's known as Das Ha'elyon, and that's from teachings of the Arizal, Rabbi Isaac Luria, through his disciple Rabbi Chaim Vital. So far in Tanya, we have learned that Das acts as an intermediary between intellect and the emotions. Das internalizes your thoughts, so they become personally relevant. And that generates feelings. The process follows a strict hierarchy. Your innermost will and desire, which is in Hebrew known as keter, informs your intuition, which is chachma, which is then analyzed by cognition, bina, and made personally relevant by das, leading to emotions. So this paragraph really summarizes a lot of hishtalshalut, a lot of the chain of spiritual soul powers. And again, the way God set up our body and our system, especially that of a king, above our head, there's something called the keter, which is
crown.
The crown, exactly. Above our head. The crown is the desire that is even above our intellectual capacity. That's the willpower that we have. And the willpower is even beyond our thinking capabilities. So when we have keser, it leads from our will to, let's go back. What's the word? To your intuition, which is chachma, that mental openness that we have in our mind. And from there, it leads to bina, which is our analysis and the cognition. And from there, it goes to das to make something personal and relevant. And from das, it leads to the emotions, the feelings that we have. So that's the hierarchy, the way Hashem set it up, from keter, which is our crown, which is the willpower and desire for something. It leads to the intuition and the chachma, and from there to, which is inquiry, and from there to the cognition and the analysis, and from there to the bina, to make something personal and relevant by focusing on it, and from there to the emotions that are developed, the feelings that come as a result. That's one way of learning das. There is, however, a second pathway indicated by Zohar through which das can receive from Keser directly, enabling you to feel the super-rational desires of your soul without any substantive intellectual pondering first. This direct pathway from Keser to Das is referred to as accessing supernal Das, or Dat Ha'elyon. So let's just pause here for a second. We're saying some really deep Kabbalistic ideas. In general, we know, and I'll pause here for a second. I already made a blessing before. We have 10 we have 10 soul powers. We've learned about them at length before, but just in short, we have 3 cognitive soul powers, which is the way we are wired to think, which is our chachma, our bina, and our das. Together, that makes out the word Chabad. That is the way we have a mental openness to think of an idea outside of us, or in better English, it's called inquiry. In general, it's referred to as wisdom, chachma. From there, it leads us to the cognition, or to analyze an idea, to be cognitive, and from there it leads to das. But above these 3, we have what's known as will, or desire for something. And when we have a desire for something, then we think about how do we get it, and then we feel the feeling of it. But it starts with Keser, and then from Keser goes to Chachma, Bina, and Das. And once we have it in our mind, well, then it can develop through that Das. It develops it into our heart, which starts with, and those are all 7 of the midas, the 7 traits and character traits that we just studied about during the counting of the Omer. 7 complete traits that we were personally refining during the Omer count, starting with Chesed, which is the ability to love and to be kind, to be excited over an idea. Then you have Gevura, which is more the discipline or justice or limiting an idea that we have. And then comes compassion or harmony, combining things together. And then there's the power of endurance and victory. There's the humility. There is connection. And then finally, there's Malchus, which is in general known as royalty. And for another time, we could talk about each one at length. But the point that what I'm trying to bring from this paragraph is, in general, the 10 soul powers are one feeding into the next. So Chachma receives from Keser, and it feeds Chachma into Bina. Bina receives from Chachma, and it gives down into Das. Das is that personalized ability to take what's in our mind and to develop it in our heart, the feelings that come, and going from one to the next. But what we're learning now is Das also has the ability to bypass the system. Das is not only receiving from Bina, which means it doesn't only come after our cognitive analysis of an idea. Das is also able to bypass the cognition, the Chachma and the Bina, and it's able to receive directly from the willpower, directly from Keser, directly from the crown. Which means not necessarily does everything have to go through the intellectual analysis in order to become excited in your heart. There is a way to get straight from a will, to make it personalized, take that will, personalize it, and now act on it with your feelings and then with your action. Kabbalistically, it's known that either there's 10 sefirot, one in one row, one under the other, but there's another way to look at the 10 sefirot as 3 pillars, where, and those that are familiar, and Steve, I know you've been studying this a lot, that there is in Kabbalah, there is ways of looking at the sefirot as also parts of our body. The right side is more the side of kindness. The left side is more the side of justice. And that's actually why it says when you give charity, you should give it with your right hand. When you extend your hand to someone, whether it's a handshake or to embrace, it's with more power in your right, because you want the right side to be dominant. Left, it says when you discipline, it should be with your left hand, with your weaker side. When you have to push away, it should be with your left side, because that's the Gevura part of us. So the 10 sefirot are also divided into 3 columns: the right side, the left side, and the middle side. So Chesed would be on the right, Gevura would be on the left, Tiferet, which is compassion, is the perfect harmony of the two, that would be in the middle. With me there? Make sense? Now, this, just like in the feelings, you have one on the right, one on the left, and one in the middle. Also, with our mind ability, you have Chachma, which is on the right, Bina, which is on the left, and Das would be in the middle. So according to this pillar is divided into three. Das is in the middle. What is right above Das? Keser. You have Keser on the top of everything. And then you have three columns. One on the right, Chachma, one on the left, Bina, and one in the middle, Das. So if you learn it from this ability, from this view or this standpoint, Das is directly under Keser, directly under the crown. So in this way, Das, so to speak, bypasses the intellectual flow from Chachma to Bina and then into Das. In this way, Das is able to receive directly from Keser. What does this mean relevant for us? We're trying to learn this as it relates to the Das inside of us and connected to the Moshe inside of us. So let's read it now inside. And we're on the second paragraph on the Kindle page. I think that would put us on 526 in the English. Yeah, also the second paragraph from the top. There is, however, a second pathway through which Das can receive from Keser direct, enabling you to feel the super rational desires of your soul, which is the willpower, the Keter, the crown, without any substantive intellectual pondering first. This direct pathway from Keter, the crown, to Das, to the focus, is referred to as accessing supernal Das. Accessing supernal Das doesn't mean you completely bypass your intellect. It's just that your Chachma and Bina quickly align with the preconceived conclusion of your Das, which you receive from Keser. It's as if your emotions are flowing directly from Keser, and they just pass through Chachma and Bina on the journey to your heart. So, you know, like when a person is having a barbecue outside, people go through and they're inviting guests. The guests come through the house, but that's not their destination. They're going to the backyard. So there could be things going on in the house and they're not even aware because they're going through the house, it goes through the house, but their goal is to get the steak and the beer that's outside waiting in the backyard, in the barbecue area. So Das, in order to get the flow from the desire from Keser, it still has to go through Chachma and Bina, but it's almost bypassing them. It's just going through them very quickly, and the Chachma and Bina quickly align with the idea, the way it's going to come into Das, the way our willpower wants it to happen. Okay, supernal Das then has the power to bypass hierarchies in the metaphysical realm. In this case, it short circuits Keser to Das, effectively bypassing Chachma and Bina. So that's known as supernal Das, which is the Das that's basically receiving directly from the Keser. As we shall see, since Moshe's soul is rooted in supernal Das, Moshe has the power to short circuit connections between higher states of mind and the souls of Israel. So this is an incredible idea where a person could feel, I'm not intellectually capable of taking the Chachma and Bina and making it so personally relevant to the idea where it generates the feelings. Comes along the Das Elyon, which is the supernal Das, which is the Das the way Moshe had it, which is able to receive directly from the higher level of Keser, the crown of God, which is the willpower that a person has, and so to speak, bypass the Chachma and Bina that we have and go directly into Das to generate the feelings of the heart. And that we're able to do thanks to the Moshe that is inside of us, that is rooted from this higher level of Das. So it, so to speak, short circuits the connection with the higher Chachma and Bina, and then it goes directly into the souls of Israel through our feelings. Any questions on that? You know what, for those that are on Zoom, I don't think I'm able to hear you today. So let's see, any questions? How do we nourish our Das? Ooh, good question. That is, welcome to chapter 42. Mrs. Berger, that's going to be the main theme of this chapter. How do we nurture it? Meaning, how do we tap into that Moshe? Good point. would a flash of insight be comparable to the flow of Kesser into Das? So, Lynn, that's a very good question. In general, especially if we go back to chapter 3, which I know we weren't studying yet together at that point, that flash of an idea is actually generally referred to as Chachma. Chachma is referred to the Barak HaMavrik, the flash of lightning. That when you have an idea, it's so raw and undeveloped that if someone were to catch your attention and ask you something else, you would almost lose the idea and it would frustrate you. Because it's not, Bina is developing the idea, and then Das would make it, when you focus on it, you're able to make it yours, make it personally relevant. The flash is referred to generally as Chachma, because it's when you're opening yourself up to something outside of you and you're able to get ideas inside of you. Keser, so I wouldn't translate Keser as that flash. Keser is more like a desire we have inside of us. And just to explain to you how relevant this desire is, so many times when we have a willpower for something, if I take a reflex, a reaction, when I want something, sometimes you have to develop it to go from the mind to the heart. It takes time to transition to get that idea into an action, into a behavior. But sometimes you're able to get from a desire, a willpower to something directly into action. It bypasses anything. For example, the second you want to run somewhere, you don't have to generate excitement to run. It can go straight from your willpower to the action, to the running. Sometimes the willpower, the reflex, when I have a will for something, it's all over. It's not just in my mind, and it develops into the heart, and then it signals out to the hand. Instantly, it's able to be connecting with all parts of yourself. Yes, Shira.
So would you say an example might be your love for another fellow Jew, like a Hapas Yisrael? So you have the keter, the crown, and immediately bypasses everything, goes into love, the emotion.
Maybe. So it's interesting. Most times, I don't know if everyone was able to, were you guys able to hear Shira? So it's a good question. Most times I would say, especially when we learn chapter 32, sometimes it's easy to love another person. It's natural, but sometimes it's very difficult. Yes. And it takes effort. When it takes that effort, then you actually have to work on it to get from, to develop it and to make it yours. And just briefly, the chapter 32, the main message from the concept of love is to realize that we have to look at our fellow not as a competitor to us, not as another body, but as another soul. And when we look at the other person from a soul perspective, then you could develop that love, and it could become natural. But I think it still needs to be worked on. Das is making knowledge personally relevant. Exactly. So, the way we generally translate Das is knowledge, but it's more than just knowledge. It's knowledge that I'm acquiring, that is becoming mine, right? So over here, we're referring to it as recognition or recognizing the idea. Oh yeah, bye, Lynn. I know you have to leave by 10. Awesome. I guess you left already. I've learned that the translation of Das is knowledge. Does this hold true in this teaching, or should we think of a different translation? So yeah, it's a good question. And generally, that's always the way it's been translated. But as we learn more and more in Tanya, we're appreciating more what Das is about. And based on what we're learning here, it's more than just knowledge. It's focus. It's my knowledge. It's making it mine. Over here, it's referring to it as recognition. But the beauty of this specific section of the chapter is saying that we're learning almost like two types of Das. There's the general casual Das, which is receiving from Bina. That means once you have the intellect of an idea, you're making it yours. But now we're learning about something called Das Elyon, or supernal Das, which is almost directly receiving from Keter, from the higher source in the crown, and bypassing Chachma and Bina, going straight into the heart. And that's something that Moshe has, and that's something that he passed on to each and every one of us. All right, so we're at the bottom of the Kindle page. I'm just going to read that paragraph again. As we shall see, since Moshe's soul is rooted in supernal Das, Moshe has the power to short circuit connections between higher states of mind and the souls of Israel. Moshe's soul, rooted in supernal das, is able to shortcut the consciousness of the 10 sephiras of Atzilus down into the souls of Israel below in this world. The reason why the physical world distracts us from an awareness of God is because we have lost the consciousness of Atzilus. In Atzilus, God is real and tangible, while the physical world is a distant dream. In this world, the opposite is true. Physical reality is obvious and real, whereas to find God, we need to enter the imaginative space of the mind. Since Moshe's soul is rooted in supernal das, it can provide a shortcut for our souls to access a glimmer of the consciousness of Atzilus, making God's presence more real and tangible to us. While the vision may not be a clear one, it will definitely give us a boost in the daily challenge of trying to worship an invisible God in a world full of physical distractions and temptations. And see more from the third Chabad Rebbe, known as the Tzemach Tzedek. So just to explain, this idea is really cool. There's two realities in the world. One is the godly reality, and the other one is the physical reality. Most of us are on, besides for Steve Ellman, most of us are on a mundane perception where we see physical, and whatever is beyond that is more, the translation over here is the word imaginative, but it's something that we need to put effort in order to be able to see, in order to spiritually see it. To say it in Kabbalistic terms, it's olam b'pshitus v'elokus b'eschachus. The way we generally see things is the world is what's the main thing, is what we see, is what's tangible, and godliness and godly light is something that we need to work on trying to develop and appreciate. But the way the worlds are in supernal levels, or in the world we're talking about over here is Atzilus. In the world of Atzilus, Elikus b'pshitus, godliness is what's natural and normal, and the world is what's unusual and weird. In the world of Atzilus, the world that Moshe was in, godliness was the main thing. That's what he was able to see and touch and feel. And the world is something novel. The world is something different, something unusual. Our world is usually what's natural. We should put efforts to see godliness as the main thing. So it almost, instead of seeing, let's say, I'll just give a regular example. The way we usually see the world is we work for 6 days and then we get the benefit of Shabbos. But the way we should be seeing is Shabbos is the main thing. Every day when we work, it's a build up to Shabbos. It says in the Talmud that there were sages that every day they would go shopping. I don't know if they went every day, but whenever they were at the market, they would see a fish. If it was Sunday, they would say, this is for Shabbos. And then comes Monday and they see a better fish and they say, this one's for Shabbos. I mean, their whole week was almost preparing for Shabbos. That was the main thing of their week, Shabbos. The way we look at money is we earn it, we deserve it, we benefit from it, and we also have to remember to divide some for charity. But there are some philanthropists, and it's I heard them share this, that the way they look at their money is there's the first 10% that goes to charity. That's the first part of their income. Their earnings, they already set aside the charity. Then they get 90% that they get to keep, and God trusts them to do the right thing with it. But 10% is the capital, is the principle. That has to remain as godly. That's the way they look at it. Their whole desire of earnings is in order to make sure they're able to keep up with their commitments that they make to charity. There's some beautiful stories of the Rebbe and previous Rebbes where, they encourage people to take on a pledge of charity. And the person felt, even though I don't know how I'm going to do it, I'm going to commit to it. If the Rebbe believes that I can do it, I'm going to do it. And they did it. And what happened is new channels, new business deals came through that they weren't expecting at all. And they were able to give and fulfill that because they were able to open up new channels when they took on a higher perception of reality, of trust of God, that this can happen. And my friend who's the Chabad rabbi in Santa Rosa, his father-in-law, his name was Rabbi Zalman Deitch. And there were several times when the Rebbe encouraged him to give a big chunk to tzedakah. And even though he felt, oh my gosh, like I don't know how to do it, he took out a second mortgage on his house to be able to fulfill a pledge to charity. And literally, as he was walking from the bank, new business deals came up that were totally unexpected, and it brought great wealth to him and his family. It all came from that higher perception of reality that godliness is the main thing in the world. That's like our main agenda. That's who we are. So this Das Elyon, this supernal level of Das that we're learning about by Moshe in the world of Atzilus is a higher perception of reality that we can each tap into. I'm going to share that screen. I just found this idea to be, it's almost a shortcut that we're learning here that I just find to be a very powerful idea. In Atzilus, in this higher world, all God's attributes are merged with their emanating source. And it is a place where he and his Das are one. And he is simultaneously the power to know, the knower, and the knowledge, which is a quote from the Rambam. God himself is absolutely one, devoid of any multiplicity. The created worlds, which are the three lower worlds under Atzilus, which are Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya, on the other hand, have the consciousness of multiplicity and separateness from God. The highest world of Atzilus represents an intermediate phase between absolute oneness, which is God's essence, and multiplicity, which are the lower created worlds. On one hand, Atzilus does exhibit some multiplicity. It has 10 different attributes of Chachma, Bina, Das, etc. But on the other hand, Atzilus has a profound unity, since the attributes are merged with their emanating source. So in Atzilus, there is multiplicity, but without separateness. That is why the Kabbalists refer to Atzilus not as God, but godliness, or in Hebrew, Elokut. A realm of 10 attributes cannot be God, because God is one. But since the attributes are merged with God without any separation, they could be called godly. Rambam's statement that God and his Das are one captures the character of Atzilus. There is the phenomenon of a distinct attribute, in this case Das, but it is nevertheless totally merged with God. So this idea is a really cool one. Once the Sephirot, or the powers of God to create worlds, the 10 Sephirot, are coming into the worlds of Bria, into the three lower worlds, there is a distinctive place for Chachma and a distinctive place for where Bina is. Each one has their space. Each one has their area. But in Atzilus, which is the world of emanation, that is the world that is the intermediary between God, the essence of God, the infinite light, and the lower worlds. So in order to create that segue between God and created being, a created world, there is a place where there are lights, but it's not distinctive. It's not multiplicity. There is the light of Chachma, but it's still combined with the light of Bina and the light of Das. So the point of what we're trying to bring here is that in the world of Atzilus, God and his Das are still one. It's not multiplicity. There is an area called Das, but it's not so distinctive and separate from the area of Chachma, from the area of Bina. And that's why in this higher level of Das, the way it is in Atzilus, the way it was by Moshe, Moses our leader, Das is known as Das Elyon. It's the level of Das that is fully connected with what's higher, with the level of Keser. Oh yeah, cool. It's like the colors through a prism. Awesome. I wish you could unmute and explain more, but that's a perfect way where it's not so distinctive, right? Is that the awesome? Vivian, does that resonate with you? Does that make sense?
This is fabulous.
Awesome. Okay. So what we're trying to get to is, again, the idea that in our soul we have the ability to tap into this Das, because we have a level of Moshe that's rooted in our soul, that he nurtured this ability of Das the way it is in Atzilus, to almost bypass the full order of going through Chachma, going through Bina, and then coming to Das. You're able to tap into the Das itself, which is getting from a higher source of Keser, and right away develop a feeling in the heart. And that's because in the world of Atzilus, it's not a place of multiplicity, and therefore there's no distinctive reality. And actually, just one more thing that we just covered in the past paragraph or two is that this place of Atzilus, the light of God there is referred to as Elokut, or godliness, or godly, because it's not yet distinctive to be called only Chachma or only Malchus or whatever Sephira. It's all really part of one. So it's all godliness brought together. Thomas, make sense? Okay.
But all the Sephirot are one too. Everything's
Exactly.
one. Yeah.
But the way it is in Bria, in the lower world,
Mhm.
it's more distinctive.
Right.
There's the place of the soul root, the way it is in Chachma of Bria. There's people that come more from Netzach of Bria. But the way we are able to tap into that Silas part, which is that higher world of emanation, it's not as distinctive. It's not multiplicity. It is all merged with the source. So there are levels, but they're not so distinct and separate. They're all merged as one. Okay. And furthermore, we receive additional influence from Moshe's soul through another pathway. So till now, we were saying the pathway that we receive from Moshe is through this Das Elyon, which is this supernal Das that is able to influence the feelings in our heart and our soul directly. But now he's going to say another part of us that we have from Moshe. Up to this point, the Tanya has been discussing how Moshe's soul influences your soul directly. But the connection has been a relatively weak one. You have only been able to draw energy from Moshe's soul. His soul does not actually enter you. But now we will discuss another type of influence where a spark from Moshe's soul actually enters a human being here on earth. And I think we were discussing this at last week, I think towards the end of the class. This won't happen to you directly, as it's something experienced only by the sages of each generation. But by learning from contemporary sages, you will be able to receive an additional influence from Moshe's soul in a more tangible way. Because in every single generation, there is not only the distant influence of Moshe's soul, but actual sparks from Moshe's soul come down and become enmeshed in both the body and soul of the sages of that generation. And that's a direct quote from Tikkunei Zohar. The sages of each generation being the eyes of the congregation, or in Hebrew it's known as Einei Ha'eda, and that's exactly how God refers to the leaders of the generation. And these sparks of Moshe's soul empower the sages to teach Das to the people.
I have a question. So we're talking about, when we talk about Moshe's soul, we're talking about the spiritual DNA, basically.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to make a distinction between Moshe's soul coming down versus Hashem, making sure that we're not saying that Moshe is Hashem. We're saying that there's the spiritual DNA that comes down to us.
Moshe?
Just passed on, yeah.
Yeah. And meaning not Hashem? Just one more time?
Yeah, I just want to make a distinction for me between Hashem and Moshe. I mean, Moshe was the greatest prophet, but Moshe was not Hashem.
Yeah, I don't think we're saying that Moshe is Hashem here.
No, I don't think you're right. I'm
just
just trying to make a distinction in my own mind's eye, because we're talking about Moshe's soul coming down.
You're kind of contrasting it with like Christianity, where they have the three,
No,
the
no,
Holy Trinity. Okay, I thought you were kind of thinking along those lines.
no.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the beauty over here is, and let's just go back for the source in the Torah. Let's just in the Torah, in the book of Numbers, chapter 15, it says that Moshe basically told God, I need help. I can't lead these people on my own. So it says God instructed Moshe to gather 70 elders. And Vayetza min haruach, he was supposed to give from his spirit, from Moshe's spirit, to the elders, and they became leaders of the people. They became able to help Moshe and guide the people. They were given prophecy. And for those familiar with the story, I know if Lynn was here, she would right away quote the verse. But there was two of these 70. Their names were Eldad, which is a pretty common Israeli name Eldad, and another one was Medad, and they continued prophesying even after the Spirit was given to them. And anyway, the story continues, and most of that part is not relevant for right now. But the point was that God referred to them as Inei Ha'eda, the eyes of the congregation. And in every generation, there is that leadership that was bequeathed from Moshe to the leaders of that generation. As the word Rebbe itself, which means teacher, but Rebbe stands for Rosh B'nai Yisrael, the head of the Jewish people. And in every generation, there's the leader, whether it was the Rambam, Maimonides in his generation, or whether it was the Arizal, Rabbi Isaac Luria in his generation, or the Rebbe, as he was simply known in our generation. They are the leaders. And when we go to them, there is a special inspiration that when we connect with the leaders, they're known as Rosh B'nai Yisrael, the leaders of the Jewish people, the leaders of the community. And so it's not referring to just a rabbi or even a rav. We're referring to selected few, like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai of his generation, that have that gift of leading the way Moshe was. Moshe was given that gift from Hashem, and in every generation, bequeathed from Moshe are the leaders of that generation. So till today, there is the concept. It's in the olden days, it was known as Aliyah L'Regel, and it's actually brought in halacha till today, that in the olden days, there was the mitzvah on festivals to go to the temple. It was called Aliyah L'Regel. Aliyah means going up, and going up for the festival, going up for the holiday. The 3 holidays of the year, the entire Jewish people would go to the temple. And there's some beautiful stories. The famous one is with Hannah, who was the wife of Elkanah, who was a leader of the Jews. And Elkanah would go every year to make the pilgrimage, and he would, on the way, they would go, as they would go from community to community, they would all join along the parade as they would make their way to the temple. And when Hannah came along, she did this incredible prayer to God, and that's where she was gifted with her son, who became known as the great prophet of the Jewish people, her son named Shmuel or Samuel. But it says that after the temple was destroyed, we still have the mitzvah to do a pilgrimage, and that's to the leaders. So already from hundreds of years ago, people would travel literally on foot across Russia. They would travel on foot to the Baal Shem Tov for the festivals, and then to the Alter Rebbe to the festivals, and then to the Rebbe. People would go from all over to be at 770, which the 3 of you here have been. And I don't know, Ron and Mrs. Berger, have you guys been to 770?
Yes, I got.
I've been to
$5.
770.
You know what? I can't
Yes.
hear you. I don't know. I'm sorry. I know you guys are muting, but there's something wrong with the
Can you hear
computer's not
me?
letting me hear you guys. So just give me a thumbs
you-
up, maybe.
Uh,
Oh, good. You've both been to 770. Okay, awesome. So, and God willing, we should make another trip. Maybe next year we'll do another trip to 770 and to the Rebbe's resting place and the OL. But the point I'm trying to bring out is the idea of connecting with the Moshe of our generation, with the leader of our generation, is by default is also connecting us with Moshe himself, because the spark of Moshe is found in the leaders of the generation. And when we connect with them, we're also connecting with the Moshe and with Moshe. So the point we're trying to bring out over here is not only are we receiving us the das that Moshe gives us, but we're able to also receive a spark, a DNA of Moshe himself. Oh, cool. I didn't know that you received a blessing from there. That's awesome. Very special. Okay, so let's see that now inside. I just want to read that paragraph again, because let's just review that again. The influence you receive from Moshe's soul via the contemporary sages is more powerful. Did I not read this yet? I don't think I read this paragraph. Not yet, right? Okay. Is contemporary sages more powerful and tangible than the direct influence you receive from Moshe's soul? Since in the contemporary sages, an actual spark of Moshe's soul is present, and B, that spark is embodied even in the physical presence of the contemporary sage, the body and soul of the sages. This additional power of the contemporary sages to nourish your das is stressed by the text of the Tanya here. Above, when discussing the direct influence of Moshe's soul, you were empowered simply to have das of God. But here, when speaking of the influence of Moshe's soul through the contemporary sages, the Tanya stresses that you will be empowered not only to have das of the greatness of God, but also to worship Him with heart and soul. The sages will empower you not only to acquire das, but also to translate it practically into devotional worship. This is such a cool idea. There's one of the I love read. I don't read often enough because thank God we're busy and I fall asleep when I try to read. But short stories of the Rebbe is something that always inspires me. Every night I try to read some beautiful stories, and there's some books. I have some here on the shelf and some at home. They are compiling incredible stories of people's encounters and people's the influence that the Rebbe had on people's lives. One of them that I was just reading is from a lady. Her name is I think Finkelstein. I forgot her name, but she says how she really wanted a child. She had one already, and she was already in her late 40s, and the doctor says you're not going to have one. And they were standing by dollars on Sunday morning, her and her husband. Her husband was a dignitary in New York. I forgot what his position was. And they came in front of the Rebbe, and the Rebbe blessed them with a child, even though they didn't ask for it. They were just feeling it in their heart. The Rebbe blessed them. And by the next year, they had a child, and they came by the Rebbe on Sukkot, and the Rebbe says, "I'm so happy you brought the blessing."
Mm.
And there's this beautiful picture. You see them holding their baby, and the three of them, the Rebbe and the parents, are both smiling, and they're receiving a blessing from the Rebbe, a piece of cake actually, which was known as lekach that we give on during the holiday of Sukkot. How the Rebbe knew that they wanted another child, and the blessing that the Rebbe gave them when doctor says you're not going to have another child, it's incredible. And for me, the incredible part is that they came back the next year to show the baby to the Rebbe and to say thank you.
With the blessing.
Thank you for the blessing, and they got the blessing. It's a beautiful, and these stories are how the Rebbe knew it. Who knows? But there's that power. When you saw the Rebbe, you saw something, a window into the depth of your soul. And it's not only the Rebbe; it's the leader of that generation. In previous generations, they went to the previous Rebbes. In Moses' generation, obviously, they went to Moses. Wow. Mrs. Berger is saying a similar story that she has in her family. I wrote an article about Nashe. I would love to read the article. How long ago did you write the article, Mrs. Berger? Because I think the Nashe, their newsletter is archived, so maybe I think it's all online. I would love to see it.
Oh, yeah, well, it was
That's
like
amazing.
28
So anyway,
years
the point
ago.
of what we're going to summarize just the message of today's class, and I don't think happened. Did we get up to 528 yet? I don't think so, right?
Yeah.
Oh, we did? So maybe we'll end with the practical lesson also. Cool.
The next time would be the Tanya reminds us.
Oh, good. So we're almost close to section 2 then. Okay, awesome. So we'll conclude with a practical lesson, and then let's. So if you're following in the Kindle, I don't think you have this inside, so you're just going to listen to me. And if you're looking in the book, it's on 528, the practical lesson. If you want your feelings for God to have stability and consistency, you need to nurture your das, the part of your soul that makes ideas personally relevant. In this task, your soul will be assisted by the soul powers of the biblical figure of Moshe. This embodied energy of Moshe's soul is particularly strong in the sages of each generation. So by connecting with and learning with that from them, your das will grow. So I love how he words it here, where you could already on your own be inspired by an idea, be inspired by Torah. But if you want it to last, if you want it to be consistent, you need to develop the das to be strong in you. The more you develop das, which is the focus and the personalization of an idea, the more you will take ownership of that. The more you will be able to teach it to someone else. The more it becomes part of you. How do you develop this das? So this is God gave us an assistance by Moshe. When we connect with the das of Moshe, which is known as the supernal level of das, which is coming from the world of Atzilus, that's something that we can nurture inside of us with the help of what Moshe accomplishes, giving us this das. Particularly when we connect with the leaders of the generation, which Moshe's soul is particularly more embodied in. When we connect with them and we learn with them or from them, our das will grow as well because it's nurturing the das inside of us. So to summarize, we know from this is not the Alter Rebbe's novel idea. It's actually a quote from the Talmud, where the Talmud says, based on the verse in the Torah, that Moshe is speaking to the Jews and saying, what is God asking from you? All he's asking from you is to fear God. So the Talmud says, fear? That's not easy. That's hard stuff. So the Talmud says, oh, for Moshe, it was actually easy. It wasn't that hard. But the Alter Rebbe says, we're not talking about Moshe. The verse is talking about each and every one of us. Moshe was talking to us. So the Tanya builds up this beautiful idea that we need to nurture a part of Moshe inside of us. And if we do that, then we could develop the yira, the awe, the reverence of God. How do we nurture das? And that's really, and I think Ms. Berger, that was your question earlier, by tapping into the das inside of us. Moshe bequeathed to every one of us not only regular das, but das elyon, the das from his level, which was the world of Atzilus. In the world of Atzilus, das, while it is distinct as das and not chachma or bina, das is known as supernal das, that it's able to receive directly from Keser, directly from the desire or the willpower or the crown of God. Because in Atzilus, there's no multiplicity. Every sephirah, every divine light is enmeshed with the other. So while it is known as das, it's actually connected with chachma and bina. So to speak, at the level of das, the way Moshe had it in Atzilus, it's able to bypass chachma and bina because they're all enmeshed together. So Moshe, being a shepherd, is able to nurture das inside of us and mentor us in attaining this higher level of das. But even more, the Alter Rebbe continued, and this is what we're concluding the class with today. There is a spark of Moshe inside every one of us. And when we develop and uncover that spark, we're able to find that das inside of us. Particularly by connecting with the leaders of our generation, it helps us uncover that spark of Moshe and helps us uncover that das to be nurtured inside of us. Because the leaders of every generation embody Moshe's soul in a particularly stronger way. So when we connect with a leader of our generation, the Rebbe of our generation, and learn with them or from their Torah, like we're doing right now with the Alter Rebbe, connecting with their teachings, or connecting with whichever Rebbe's teachings, it's able to nurture that das and helps us develop this level of yira. And I want to conclude this class by saying, I'm not going to say names directly, but over the holiday, we had people staying with us for the holiday of Shavuot. And there were particularly, on the night of Shavuot, we have the custom of learning all night long. It's to almost prepare the night before we receive the Torah. At Sinai, 3,300 years ago, it says we slept soundly. So it became a thing to repair that by staying up all night and learning Torah. So the night of Motzei Shabbat, on Saturday night, which was the night of Shavuot, we stayed up all night. And I stayed up with a few people. Brad came, and there's another person, his name is Michael, and some of them slept over here. It was really, really nice. And another one his name is Itzik, who owns the kosher bakery Frena. And the three of them, on their own, later on in life, in the past 5-10 years, they've become on fire in Torah. And it's, for me, I grew up with Torah, but for so many people that I'm meeting now, they on their own have been making sacrifices and taking on a life that is so authentic in Torah that it's really inspiring. And to know where they got it from, their study is developing their character of who they are. They refine their character, and each of them says, "Rabbi, you don't want to know what I did in a decade ago." And it's incredible to see, whether it's through the Tanya book or through the Rebbe's teachings or through the Zohar teachings or through other leaders that are alive or have passed that they are studying with, it's developing, it's literally allowing their mind to be developed, going from this das, developing and nurturing this level of yira inside of their heart, because they're able to go straight from connecting with the teachings of Torah that they're getting from whichever leader, this das that they're developing in their heart. And the whole goal of these learnings is to develop this awe and love for God, right? Those are the two feelings that we're working in chapter 41 and 42 to develop. When you have the love and awe of God, the Torah that we study, the mitzvah that we fulfill is with more passion, with more love, but in order to get with more joy. But to get it, you have to develop this feeling. How do you develop it? Through das. How do you get das? By realizing that it's coming from Moshe, it's something that we have bequeathed in us, and particularly through learning from the teachings of rabbis and leaders of generations that have in them and embody in them the quality of Moshe. All right, that will end today's class.
So can I just say one thing?
Yeah, for sure. I'm
So-
not ending the
So
class.
Mrs.